Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Food and Mood Talks. Today we are with registered dietitian Gabrielle, and we're going to talk about our relationship with food and why we don't want to stop being emotional eaters.
Yes, I'm so excited for this topic, Sarah, because I have so many people who come to me. They fill out an application to work with me or join the group program, and almost always one of their goals is to stop being an emotional eater, like word for word. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the subtle signs of an unhealthy relationship with food, why you don't want to stop being an emotional eater, and how mending your relationship with your true self is going to allow you to embody a healthy relationship with food. I think it's important to note that, when you're in a romantic relationship or a relationship with a friend, in order for that relationship with a person to be really healthy, is you have to be really in touch with your true self, right? So you can meet your needs and your desires, and you can communicate your needs and desires, and you can fulfill those. And that's the same thing with eating as well. So we're going to dive right into the topic and first better understand what is an unhealthy relationship with food. I think that most people would say, I don't have an unhealthy relationship with food, or have no idea that maybe they don't have the healthiest relationship. And it takes a little bit of like stepping back and looking at the big picture, and also breaking out of our norm and our diet culture that is so prominent in our media and society, of things that we're saying or things that we're doing that are normalized, but really aren't very normal and aren't healthy. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, some of the top things that I notice myself personally and professionally of an unhealthy relationship is when people are very obsessive or restrictive over their foods, or they deem things good or bad. Food causes them anxiety. Food, they feel really controlling around food and what they're eating. I would say that also things like ignoring your body's natural cues. So when I'm hungry, I'm just going to keep starving myself. Or when I'm full, I'm going to keep eating. That puts you in that like restrict and binge cycle that a lot of people fall into. These are all, in my opinion, red flags of an unhealthy relationship. And we'll talk about how to get here, but a healthier relationship, there's joy, there's satisfaction, you're going with the flow. Again, this kind of like mirrors a healthy relationship with a person too, is things are joyful, things are satisfying, you're going with the flow, you're not so obsessive over things. You're listening to your body, you're giving your body what it needs in terms of taste and satisfaction and hunger, and you respect your body. Other green flags would be, things like you're not obsessing over the calories or macros or the little tiny bits of information on food. You don't have to justify all your food choices. So like sitting at a dinner table with your friends of, oh, well, I'll run this off tomorrow, I'm going to get the brownie sundae. And you don't have these like cheat days where you go crazy one way or the other. Those, in my opinion, green flags versus red flags with food. So I guess the first step is understanding really like who is eating and what thoughts are going through your head before you eat. And we did just record an episode of it's called Who is Eating. Definitely go give it a watch because we dive much deeper into this topic. But Sarah, hand it over to you to talk a little bit about your perspective on who's at the table.
Yeah, and I love the way that you laid that out. That's so beautiful. Like it just really covers many different ways that we can relate with food. And yeah, just a couple of things, the diet culture. And one thing that I feel can be equally as toxic is the anti-diet culture.
Mhm.
And that has just become another stereotype of how we need to be eating. So it's just my whole like intention to help my clients is to stop needing to hear everybody else's opinion, right? Like, who the hell cares how a relationship with food should be like, right? Like, we determine it. Life doesn't have innate meaning, we give it meaning. So that's really important. And this is like also the way that I see the flags. I would see it with different colors. I would see like like what you labeled as red flags, which yeah could be super scary, also I would see them as like pink flags and like my little coffee cup. Because then it's a cue of something's calling for our attention, and that's
Mhm.
beautiful because it's waking us up to something that we didn't know was going on.
Mhm.
So like yeah, it's a pink flag. It's like a gentle hey, like you need to start listening. You need to start listening because something's cooking here. Um, and then like when we're sitting at the table feeling centered, feeling like we are here, our boundaries, like our energetic boundaries feel healthy. We don't feel like all perforated, like it's just going out into comparing, a lot. What is that person eating? Oh my God, is she eating less than me? I should stop eating. Or like, oh, they didn't offer me that food. Or like, oh, how do I ask for that? These are all signs that our energetic boundaries are not healthy. And we stop listening to ourselves because we go very mental, we go very heady. And then heady eating is the opposite of emotional eating. It's disembodied eating, right? So it's so helpful to just have the only intention to center ourselves, not about what do I need to eat, but first of all, have the intention that, okay, we are listening to our own cues, especially like in social situations. And that's how we can kind of redirect from how much do I need to eat to, like you said, the hunger cue, the fullness cue. Like sometimes continuing overeating, it's because yeah something is happening too fast. So the only intention is, okay, I can just pause and finish later, but get back into my body, get back into my center.
Mm-hmm. Stop focusing on what's right versus wrong. And
Yeah.
that's the same thing I deal with diet culture versus the anti-diet culture. And I love that you brought that up because I also I don't love diet culture. I don't like it at all. It drives me crazy. But I also am not on the side of what a lot of dietitians in my field are on, the anti-diet culture, because I think they're a little bit too intense too, in terms of this is right and wrong, just like diet culture is doing. This is right and wrong. Nothing is right and wrong. What is best for you is what feels best for you mentally, physically, and emotionally. So there's no right way to do anything, and there's no wrong way to do anything. It's all dependent on what feels best from you. And just like anything, and this is what we talk a lot about in our last episode, of understanding what thoughts are even coming up and what they're trying to tell you, and having grace and compassion for yourself, and not saying, oh, why is that thought coming up before I eat? Or that's what's causing me to eat past my hunger and fullness cues. It's just noticing them, doing that first step of self-awareness, which is a lot of what you talked about with the internal family systems perspective in our last episode. And then understanding what your body's trying to tell you in that moment. But that's not something that takes overnight. That takes a lot of practice. And like you said, getting back into your body, snapping out of autopilot, which a lot of us get sucked into in the way we live, and just being in your body and listening to what it's saying, and slowly but surely being able to honor that, because we understand that that's not something you can just naturally honor after one day of practicing mindfulness. uh, so keep,
To bring in like yeah the internal family systems episode that we recorded, it's great for that, to really see like what's showing up. And like you said, we don't need to figure everything out. Obviously we're not going to figure everything out. There's no way we're going to go to the root of our issues in a dinner table, right? Like that's not it. But it doesn't matter, because the only thing, well, one thing that really really helps me and my clients is to just remind ourselves, this sounds familiar, this feels familiar. Me sitting right here right now with all of these emotions, this chaos, this internal turmoil feels familiar. And also you can watch the Enneagram episode, because when we are very familiar with our like core motivations, our core fears, our weaknesses, then it's just easier to be like, oh, there we go, that's it, I'm comparing myself to this person, I'm comparing, this is it, and it's familiar. That's it.
instead of just spiraling and detaching from what's coming up, which a lot of us do, we spiral, we detach. It's attaching to what's happening. This is familiar. What's going on? And working through it.
Exactly. And just noticing that it's a pattern. It's not anything from this moment. It's a stale pattern.
Yeah.
And we can move on. And
Yeah.
we can come back to it later and enjoy our ice cream sundae today right now.
Yes, yes. And yeah, we talk a lot about in our last, I mean, couple episodes. This relationship with food is going to be a topic no matter what we're talking about between you and I, because it's kind of like the umbrella of it all, our relationship with food and our goal of eating from our empowered selves. But an activity that I work through with clients is there's a few, it's building that self-awareness, so understanding when things, common patterns are happening, where they're happening, what's going through your head, understanding the promise of reward when it comes to using food to fill gaps, and understanding what gap are you trying to fill and how can we work on that, to disidentify from the pain. And then there's the idea where I talk about with clients of the emotional eater, and how we are born emotional eater. So you being an emotional eater is not a bad thing. And I have a whole protocol on this topic where we dive into the fact that you're born, you come out of the womb a screaming, crying baby. What's the one thing that makes you happy sleepy babies? Milk. And that's such a beautiful thing, that food can deliver that comfort on a physical, it's releasing your happy hormones, it's releasing your sleep hormone, but it's also comforting in a way where it physically makes you feel comforted, which emotionally makes you feel comforted. And that's a beautiful thing, that it can comfort us in a way that makes us feel really good. But it's also important to identify when we feel out of control with emotional eating, and why we feel like sometimes emotions can make us over or under eat. Sarah, and I'd love for you to take this away and give a better idea of why we don't want to shut down those emotions and detach from those emotions, and why we instead want to be emotional eaters, but be more mindful emotional eaters, I guess is what we could say.
Yes. Wait, it's cutting. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because the video is frozen, but okay, good. The sound is still on. I heard everything that you said. We want to be emotional eaters because trying to stop being emotional eaters is like trying to stop being emotional beings, and we are emotional eating beings, whether we like it or not. That's the way we're built, right? Because there's obviously some sort of intelligence to our emotions. So when we're trying to separate from the emotional eating, we're thinking that the emotions around the eating, because it's causing us so much pain, are what are bad, right? And it's so many stories that go around that.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start feeling like, okay, these are giving us signs, it's getting us in touch with our intuition, because emotions are like the messenger, right? It's like and this is why I like to work on a psycho spiritual level, because if it's like purely nutrition, this obviously wouldn't make sense, but it's putting things in a different, like in a different context, right? um why do we have emotions in the first place, and what are we doing here, right? When we're feeding ourselves, we are choosing to be here in this life, and we want to feed ourselves not just to stay alive, but to also realize like there's something else.
Mm-hmm.
So the emotions are messengers, and they're connecting our soul to,
Mm-hmm.
and our psyches, to something bigger than us, to our dreams, our visions, our purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Then we want to be listening to these signs, because we want to be aligned, and we want to flow with life in our own way instead of trying to follow other people's paths. So
Mm-hmm.
then I feel like listening to our emotions is the most important thing. And what better way to do it than through healing, through a healing process, right? It's just like a nightmare. You have dreams, you have dreams. Our dreams are always trying to show us like what we need to integrate. And then when we're not listening to our dreams, that's when the nightmares come up. But
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, you know what, wake the F up. Like now it's the time. We're not gonna play loose anymore. So this is also like what any compulsion can do. So it's mirroring us. There's something I need to work, because I can't live like this anymore. So that's why it's also really important to know, maybe I do struggle with food. Like when we think that no, everything is perfect, like this is just the way that I am. By looking at these signs and like the flags and everything that you were talking about, then it's really interesting to see like, okay, I'm having a calling here, and I need to tune inwards to
Mm-hmm.
my emotions, to myself.
And you're going to have different phases, right? You're going to have different messages that are coming through the emotions, different stages of life. I mean, whether you're in high school or you're in college, or you are in a really stressful job, or you have 5 kids, or you are in a healthy relationship versus an unhealthy marriage, like you're going to have different phases of your life, and your emotions are the little messengers that are trying to bring you more in touch with that true self. And that's where you can utilize that with eating, because I think there's going to be different foods, different ways of eating that are going to nourish your needs through these different phases of life, right?
Totally, totally, totally. And because it's like when we're exploring something new, maybe our intention is to explore, like you're traveling, you're in Italy, like you
Hmm.
see all these different pizzas and pastas and cheeses and all of this. And maybe back home, the narrative is don't eat these things because they're bad. And then you go to Italy and like, oh, I want to explore. I love food. And this is the narrative. But at the same time, there could be parts of us that are like, but you're doing something bad. How are you enjoying this? Right. And so then it feeds into like this negative spiral of maybe overeating and not listening because we're disembodied from
Yes, that's where
different
you spiral. Yeah,
exactly.
it's
We
the
need to be
intention.
aligned with
Yeah.
intention. Yeah.
When you have intention, then you're able to enjoy your travels more. You're able to enjoy holidays more. You're able to enjoy different cultures more, because when you're traveling, you can enjoy, yeah, the pasta and the cheese when you're Italy, or the gelato or things like that that maybe aren't in your normal day-to-day eating habits, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. And then it's your intention going into when you're eating them, or is your mind telling you this is bad? Why are you eating this? You got to make up for this when you get home. Or is it, wow, how beautiful is it that somebody put together this homemade pasta for me that's filled with all these different local cheeses, and herbs and sauces, and I get to sit here and enjoy this that a lot of people don't get to enjoy. And just noticing how it's making you feel energetically and physically. And it doesn't have to feel the same as it does as a perfectly healthy meal that you eat back at home, if you're going into it with the right intention, and you're going into it from a mindful standpoint where you're honoring your true self. And that's the same thing with holidays is a big one. I have clients say, oh my gosh, I totally spiraled after the holidays this season. And usually I ask them, well, what was your mindset during these holiday situations? And it was, well, I, eat so well, and don't eat all the bad foods all week long. So then when, Christmas and New Year's came, I kind of just like blacked out and completely went mindless and overate and ate to the point where I almost felt like I was going to throw up. And it's all because of the mindset and the intention that was set before going into that holiday meal that caused you to get to that point.
Totally. And also, one thing to also notice is when we relate travel with experience and adventure and food, and we make that only like our vacation time, we're not living life fully to our own standards, right? Because we don't want it to be the outlet. Oh, I'm traveling, now I get to experience Italy through its food. What if I don't want to do that, right? Like I travel a lot. So for me, traveling felt like home, and it's like my intentions really weren't of like I want to try everything. And
Mhm.
it's like I want to eat in a way that makes me feel good, right? So I feel like we also have the narrative that if I'm in Italy, I need to try everything. But that's just another narrative, right? Maybe that's not what we want. So we
Mhm.
really want to be like, again, with the intention. And also, one really important thing regarding travel and adventure and all of this is like, we want to be a tourist in our own city. Because when
Mhm.
we allow ourselves to always enjoy life the way that
Mhm.
we do when we travel, we're not going to put so much pressure,
Yep.
right?
Yep. No, that's huge. Is how, if you're super, super restrictive on your normal Monday through Friday, say, and then you enter a holiday or you enter travels, of course you're going to go crazy because you put so much pressure to eat perfect Monday through Friday that you just go crazy when it's a holiday or at a quote unquote excuse, like when you travel and you go to a different country or whatever it might be. It's you're not even you're not, by eating everything, you're not listening to your body. You're just going to the complete opposite side of the spectrum. And like you said, maybe when you travel, you don't and once you become more in tune with your body and yourself, when you go on vacation, you'll notice like, oh, things that used to be more appealing to me stop being so appealing to me. And it's because it wasn't something that you were restricting yourself from through your Monday through Friday life back home. So when you're on vacation, it's like, man, actually, my body doesn't even really want that right now. So I'm gonna pass it up. And you're like, whoa, that's weird. That and I actually just had somebody, they celebrated Easter, and they said that they passed up a lot of things that they normally would have just went crazy and indulged with because, oh, this is my time to eat all the fat and sugar and candy and sweets because I can't do it when I go back home and eat my perfect diet. They said, no, actually, I checked in with my body. And this is a client I've had for a while who's been working on honoring that true self. And she was like, I passed up a lot of stuff that really, yeah, it was, the sweets and desserts and more indulgent stuff, but I just didn't really want it. And she was like, my daughter made a comment to me saying, I can't believe you're saying no to that. And she was like, it wasn't that I was restricting myself. It was just that I realized I didn't really want it. So I honored my body and I didn't have it. And that is such a key point, is because it all depends on your all around day to days and lifestyle with food rather than how you act when you're on vacation or on that holiday.
Totally, totally. And also another thing to look at is I can hear someone saying like, yeah, but I love to overdo it. That's a very common thing with the restrict and binge cycle, because it's like overdoing it is the only fun way, because restriction is not fun, right? So the that sounds
Yeah.
like the thrilling part. Yes, we get that. So we get that it's like the idea of splurging is fun. I totally get that. But the thing is that it can, at the same time, that fun splurge, it's sabotaging the way we want to feel in that trip, right? So it's like, okay, yeah, I can give myself the freedom to eat whatever, but it's not really what we want. It is like maybe draining and dampening our energy. So it's also just important to look at that. Like, are we giving ourselves the freedom because we feel like we want to be free and independent and nobody will tell me what to do? But at the same time, it's like also a self-abandoning, right? It's interesting.
And I think that it has a lot to do with like emotional maturity too, right? Where people are addicted to stress and chaos. And I feel like people live in this black and white world where it's either stress and chaos or numb. And that's translate into their relationship with food too, where it's like, I'm just going to go numb through my work week and eat this perfectly clean diet. And then where people are like obsessed with stress and chaos, it's the same thing with obsessed with indulging, because that is their fun
Mm.
or their way to release their emotions, I guess. So crazy. It's so crazy how our relationship with ourselves and people and our emotions completely translate with food. And that is why Sarah and I here are together talking, because it's not just about your diet. It's not just about your exercise routine. It's so much beyond that. It's your relationship with yourself. It's your relationship with your family, your friends, your external environment. But what's most important is your relationship with your true self and how in tune you are with it. Well, I think that wraps up our conversation that touches upon our relationship with food. The goal of our relationship with food, but of all the conversations that we're having through these series, is to learn how to eat from our empowered self. That is why we titled the series that, because our goal for you is that you're eating for fuel, but you're also eating for taste, for satisfaction, for joy. And you're eating that in a way that is going to honor your true self. So, to do that, there's a lot of different angles we have to take. And that's why we're touching upon a lot of them through the series. But you got to better understand your thoughts, actions, behaviors, emotions, desires. You have to become more in tune with your true self. So you know how to honor your true self mentally, physically, and emotionally at different phases of life, because life will never always look the same. You have to practice mindfulness while you're eating, but also outside of eating, because the way you handle your emotions and your mindfulness in all areas of your life translates into your relationship with food and your eating habits. You got to break the norm of what, culture and society is pressing on us as a norm, and deeming as good or bad or right and wrong, and doing what's best for you. Listening to that and repeating it and time and repetition, because this isn't something that changes overnight. It's something that we have to continuously work on and embrace as a journey, in order to have a life filled with empowered eating.
Yes, I love this. And also what you were talking about, we eat for taste, we eat for enjoyment, we eat for so many different ways of eating. And one thing that's also really, really helpful is to know that we have an infinite way in possible intentions of why we're going to eat, right? And it doesn't matter. It's the only thing is, how do I want to eat right now?
Mhm.
Right? If I want to eat for pure flavor,
Mhm.
if I want to feel like I want to be transported to Tuscany right now, how would I eat? And if that makes my body feel good, that's exactly how I'm going to eat then. But
Mhm.
it's just about us setting our own intention for this meal, not about for our life, how we want to eat in general, because then we get into our masculine and organize and all of this. But it's like right now, and again, this is, it's a path. It's not like, oh, I'm going to know immediately,
Yeah.
but to be able to sense the subtleties of our body, how our body is reacting to how I want to feel like I'm in Tuscany right now. Oh, that feels really good. Then that's going to be my intention, and that's how I'm going to eat. And this is the kind of persona that I'm going to be practicing for this meal right now. And that is perfectly okay, because that is my intention. And the way to eat for personal and metabolic power is us being true to our intention. So we get to set the rules here, and we get to set how we want to feel and what we want to eat for. Set that intention, just like in a yoga class. You set the intention in your yoga class, you work through that intention, and it's a sacred intention because it's ours. And in the Shavasana, you release, and whatever shows up, it's going to show up. There is no right and wrong way of doing it. We're just getting messages here.
Mhm. And so, yeah, the goal of all of that is to stop trying to not be an emotional eater and instead become more in tune with your emotions. Look at them as messengers, like Sarah was saying, listen to them and know that they're going to change day to day, meal to meal, snack to snack, and stop ignoring them, because that's what throws you in that start and stop mentality, that emotional rut, that makes it feel like it's impossible to get back on track and feel your best. But yeah, that's it. And thank you again, everyone, for listening. And we hope that these conversations continue to empower you to become more mindful, become more connected to your true self, so that we can become more empowered eaters every single day.
Yes, so I could go on forever, but yes, we will see you all next week. Thank you for joining us here on Food and Mood Talks, and until the next episode.
Next episode.